You're listening to Deliberate Living, a podcast that inspires, empowers, and encourages listeners to live life more authentically. My name is Holly Priestley, and I'm a full-time nomad and writer who has been living in my 1997 Ford van since January 1st of 2019. I travel the United States with my dog, learning how to live with more authenticity. I explore different ways people choose to ditch the prescribed life we've all been sold and live on their terms, finding freedom and happiness however they choose. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Deliberate Living podcast. I am your host, Holly Priestley, and my guest today, we're having different weather systems for sure. I'm over here in a tank top feeling all nice and warm, and she's over there in a hoodie and a sweatshirt in like 22 degrees. But her name is Mindy Lamott. She travels in her Promaster with her two beautiful dogs. She's been on the road just over 2 years, and I've been following Mindy for about 2 years, I think, since I started getting on the road. I noticed another lady on the road with dogs, and I was instantly intrigued. So I'm super happy to have her on the podcast today. So hello, Mindy.
Hi.
And for everybody who doesn't know who you are, hasn't been following you for the last few years, do you want to give a little bit of background about who you are, who your dogs are, why you started the lifestyle?
I got on the road. I mean, I'm Mindy. You've kind of covered the basics. My dog, Fee and Mimi, and I got on the road at the end of 2018 to promote a business called Fee and Mimi, a dog bed company. And that led to loving the adventure of road life. And here I am. I mean, that's the simple version. And there's a story behind that too, as to, I didn't plan on really traveling extensively in my van. It was empty because it had inventory in it. And maybe a month into traveling that way, not even a month, maybe a couple weeks, I was going to a friend's wedding in Washington State. And because Mimi is a pit bull mix, the hotel I was staying at wouldn't let her in. Because she made some sounds, right?
Yeah.
And that was their excuse to not let her in. And so it's midnight and I have nowhere to stay. And I'm like, what am I going to do? And there was a Walmart that I had passed on the way to the hotel. And I'm like, well, I've heard, in my research about being on the road, people do that. So I went in and I explained it to them, and they're like, oh yeah, no problem. Just park towards the back of the lot. And I got a bed out of dog beds basically. And went to sleep there, and I was like, wow, there's something really romantic about sleeping in this Walmart parking lot. And then I really never looked back from that moment on.
Pretty good inventory to have on hand.
It was convenient. Yeah. It was just, so, from there, I actually put a real bed in the van, and here I am. I think you probably agree it's a really, really convenient and fun way to travel with dogs.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think, my life before the van wasn't a bad life for my dog, right? Like, she still got to go out on adventures, and she ruled the roost and all of that. But I think she's happier on the road.
Yeah.
I think part of it is that, she's very much a mama's girl, and she was with me a lot before, but now she's with me like literally 24/7. Like, we're always together. She always really enjoyed car rides, so now we live on a car ride. Like,
I talk to so many people who are like, I don't think my dog could do it, or my dog is this, or my dog has this habit, or my dog, And the reality is they just want to be where you are. Yeah. And they, you know what I mean? So many people, well, my dog's not trained. I need to train my dog before. And it's like, no, they learn as they go. Yeah. There's a few things, Mimi was a maniac in the car. Like, it was not safe to drive with her. Yeah. It was a big question for me, going on the road, was it going to work? Yeah. With her. And now, if you see my videos, often they're of her just lounging in the front seat, she loves it. She's a great road dog. They both are for the most part. Sometimes Fee gets a little twitchy, and that's really if she doesn't have a place to run. Yeah. So.
I get that. Sometimes people will respond like, well, I bet your dog loves being cooped up in the car all day. And I'm like, well, she's not cooped up in the car all day. Like, we live out on public land where there's a ton of space. And like, I deliberately will go places where we have a ton of space because I don't want there to be other dogs around that I don't know, that she doesn't know, but I want her to be able to get out and run, you know, and I run and I hike and I do other activities, and she comes with me on all, like, she doesn't stay in the van all day.
No, it's the opinions of the internet. I think people have a hard time getting out of their four walls sometimes, and so they project that onto what you're doing, and I guess if you haven't ever done this, it might be a little hard to understand, but you know, I mean, yeah.
So when you hit the road, was there a transition period for you? I mean, obviously there was for Mimi to get used to being in the car, but for you, was it like, what am I thinking? What am I doing? Do you have any like second guesses?
That to come, because I grew up on a farm, but I was not an outdoorsy person. Mm-hmm. I'd been camping once in my life, and I hated it because there was a frog incident, meaning I saw a frog. There really was no incident. Yeah, so I was like, you know, I started after that night I described, I started traveling the Pacific Northwest, and it was just so like fun. And I think I just thought, oh, it's a novelty. Like, you're enjoying this because it's something you've never done before, mm-hmm. and it's a novelty. And oh, look, you built a fire. That's, you know, like, I thought it was so macho. I built a fire for the first time, right? Like, well,
it is macho the first time you build a fire. I still get like amped every time I can build a fire by myself. I'm like, yeah, I did that.
right. Like, you know, so it was all those things, and the novelty never wore off. You know, I feel like, if anything, now that I've had those 2 years of experiences of being outdoorsy, whatever you want, I mean, mm-hmm. That I just experience more now because I'm not figuring it out anymore.
Fair.
You know, I'm more, I mean, I used to be afraid to camp in my van in a campground, like a state park.
Yeah.
Like, so overcoming those fears is obviously very liberating and mm-hmm. what have you. But, and I don't know, you also have to overcome all the fear that everyone pumps into you when you're doing it.
Ain't that the truth?
And that's, you know, I almost feel, and not that I take it lightly, but I almost feel safer in the van than, say, when I stop and do, you know, an Airbnb or something, because I look at it this, I have a very set way of going to bed at night mm-hmm. with safety protocols, right? And if someone tries to get in my van,
you got 2 dogs that are going to let you know.
I mean, they, like, if someone gets too close in the night, they hear it, no matter how zonked out they are, and they do a very good job. But I feel confident I can jump in the driver's seat and go. You know, I can't do that if I'm in my bed in a house. Yeah. You know, I mean, you have very little chance of getting out of that situation. But I don't really talk about the whole safety protocol thing much, truthfully, because I don't want anyone to know.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I just did an episode for the podcast that was like FAQs, and mm-hmm. the top 4 questions I get are, you know, how do you go to the bathroom? How do you shower?
You know, I used to like,
but then also like the safety thing, and I talk about it, and I'm like, it doesn't serve me to tell you my safety protocols.
Right. No.
So like, I'll talk about them with you one-on-one because we are both like solo women doing our own thing, but like, I'm not just going to tell some rando or tell the internet how I keep myself safe.
You know, it's funny, like, why is it always the shower and the, you know, the toilet? Like, really? That's what you want to know about? Like, it's the adventure of a lifetime, and you want to know about that.
I mean,
but
it's
after the whole toilet paper hoarding of 2020, maybe it's not so surprising. Oh.
Yeah, if you look at society, we're pretty obsessed with going to the bathroom, turns out.
So
strange. So
yeah.
2 years ago, you started doing it, and you were kind of like just doing it to sell some inventory of your dog beds and have this experiment. And then it turned into like, oh, this is really fun. I'm going to keep doing this. Now that it's been 2 years, you've figured out your systems, and now you can just enjoy life. And what other ways has it changed over the last 2 years?
Well, my business has changed substantially, which has also allowed me to stay on the road. So in the course of being on the road, I moved my business from California to North Carolina, took on a new business partner who handles everything on the ground in North Carolina while I'm on the road. So that made it even more possible to look at this as more of a longer term thing. Mm-hmm. And it also, I don't have to carry inventory anymore, which is really nice in a van, especially, our inventory is not small. And we're not selling little tiny things. But it was like, it's almost like it relieved some anxiety, because even though I had everything like triple vacuum packed and in airtight containers, I'd be like, oh God, what if it smells like garlic when they receive it? Because I cook, you know what I mean? And just think like the different temperatures. So I always have this feeling of like, so it's very nice not to have to do that. But it was fun doing a little tour of post offices. There's some really interesting post offices out there.
I really enjoy going to small town post offices.
I do too.
Like, characters who are in there are top notch.
It's pretty interesting. So I actually do kind of miss that.
Yeah.
But my business plan became very fluid, and it still worked out. We had the best year ever, truthfully. But there was a lot of rolling with the tide, and that's not my nature at all.
Yeah.
So that was good.
More type A, more like regimented, structured.
Yeah. And that's, one of the things, once I was like, okay, I'm really into this road life. One of my things was I want to learn how to be unplanned.
Yeah.
Even when I first got on the road, I had my stops planned, and I was like, you meet people even before I got on the road who were like, oh, we don't know where we're staying tonight, or da-da, and I'd be like, that's how do you do that? Like, that is, and I think it went from like, oh my God, how do they do that, to like, oh, how do they do that? That sounds adventurous and fun. To like, now I never know. I don't have a picture of where I'm going, but I'm like, if you would have told me that I wake up in the morning and don't know where I'm sleeping that night, I would have been like, yeah. Right, that's else.
That's how it was for me at the beginning too. I wanted to know exactly where I was going, and I think that that's normal, especially like while you're still getting your wings, still who you are. And then once you do it for a long time, like these days, I need to know where I'm going, sort of, like you said, like I need to have a general area.
Well, it's like I get on, I like planning on road trippers. And so like, I know I need to be back in North Carolina in the spring, right? And I've always found that I'm more comfortable if I just have like that guiding light, but like, so I'll plan out a loose route, which changes 15 times by the time I get there, right?
Yeah, like even in the last, it's mid to late December now. It'll be January by when this goes live. But just in December, I had a plan. We were going to be in this part of northern New Mexico, and then we were going to be in this part for like one day, and then we're going to be here for one day, and then we're going to be here for a few days, and then we're going to be here for one day, like on our way south, getting to the warmth. And then none of that happened. The spots where I thought we were just going to do like a one night pass through, we ended up staying like a week. And the spots where I was like, oh, we're going to be here a week, we were only there for like one day.
Well, because it depends on, like, are the dogs happy, right?
Yes.
Do you have reception so you can work?
Yes.
And do you feel comfortable? I mean, there's a few, like, major points. Maybe there's 4, maybe there's 5. And when you hit all 5, you're like, well, not going anywhere, you know? Like,
this is perfect.
It's kind of
here.
Yeah, it's kind of rare to hit all the major points to where you're like, I mean, it's great if there's like a market within half an hour, you know, if you're going to stay somewhere for, say, a week.
Yeah.
I actually don't stay many places longer than a few days because it's kind of a safety thing for me. Mm-hmm. Like, I kind of start to feel like but I'm traveling by myself, you know, so, I do like to move every few days.
Yeah. What parts of your lifestyle are very dictated by your dogs? Because I know that a lot of my lifestyle is dictated by my dog. And I know that people who don't have dogs don't really understand. And people who do have dogs are like, oh yeah, no, I totally get that.
I mean, you know, they've become so flexible. It's really remarkable. They've
come a long way in the last 2 years that I've been watching them, at least. So I'm sure.
Yeah, like right now I'm out outside of Moab, like I said, on BLM land, and like in the morning I can just open the door, they go pee. Now they're within my sight, but when it's 20 degrees, I don't have to step outside, you know. Yeah. I would have never guessed that they were really capable of that when I first started this, but that's just, you know, something that recall they've picked up because we've had the opportunity to work it so often. But I'm trying to think. Well, I don't do a lot of cities. Cities are tough on them.
Yeah, I don't like cities either. They're not good for me.
They did do New York City, which I loved doing the van there because should you ever pass through, the best place to overnight is on the Upper East Side in the 80s, and that's like some of the most expensive real estate in New York City.
Ooh.
But yeah, just so you know. But they did do New York City and they did okay, but it's just tough on them. So I would, you know, thinking through that, I would say, like, yeah, most of it's dictated by the dogs.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, I think like their lives maybe are forever changed even when I'm not on the road because I didn't even know public land really existed before this.
Right.
So now I know, you know what I mean? Like now when I think about, well, should I stop? I think that that's a long time coming, but I know I want to live somewhere either where I have my land or I'm near that they can run like this because they love that.
It's so good for them and it's good for you. Like it's good for the dog mom to like see like her kids being happy and healthy and flourishing and
dogs. I mean, you know, you can only do so many puzzles inside your condo or, you know, like dogs just want to be dogs and they get to be dogs. But it is, I mean, I don't do a lot of campgrounds, although I think in the last year, just with things being so up in the air, I did more campgrounds. And they learned how to campground. Luckily, you know, you know, they take about a day to settle in where they don't bark at who's passing by. And luckily when we've stopped, everyone around us has been flexible and awesome with that. And now they don't take as long, but it's still like, I don't care to really do campgrounds because of the loose dog thing. I'm not a fan. Yeah.
I did an episode recently about van life with dogs. And one of my biggest PSAs was like, you have to have your dog on a leash or your dog has to be under really good voice command. Because if your dog is super, super friendly, like that's great for you. But that doesn't mean that other dogs are going to be super friendly.
Yeah, and I don't buy into this whole thing, well, then your dog shouldn't be out here. That's bullshit.
No, that's dumb. Yeah.
And I see a lot of van lifers with that attitude. And you know what? you're not part of the community. You're not part of the dog community if you have that attitude, in my opinion. Like, just like, I mean, you know, you got to work with each other.
Yeah.
And it's not safety. I mean,
yeah,
I have dogs. They're only 60 pounds each, but you know, they're muscly. They can do things.
Yeah.
I don't want to. And so I take all of my precautions to keep them safe and keep everyone safe. And I absolutely expect that others do the same.
Yeah, I'm with you. I completely agree. What do you think are some of the overall biggest pros and cons of living in a van and traveling? I know we've talked about some of the pros being that, you know, you've discovered public lands and the dogs are happy and comfortable and you've been able to, you know, grow your business in new ways. What are some of the other ones? And then what are some of the tough spots?
I mean, I do think too, like the reduction of living expenses, especially when you're growing a business, like this is a great way to do it.
Yeah.
Great way to do it. And I'm trying, I mean, cons, I say the cons, I mean, when you have a bad day on the road, it's a bad day. You know what I mean? And it can't necessarily mean like something happens or just those days you're not in the mood for it.
Yep.
They're tough.
Yeah.
You know, and those, you know, I think you see a lot of people burn out because it's a lot of work.
Yeah, it is a lot of work.
It's a lot of work, especially if you're working full time while you're doing it. You know, I think a lot of people think that we're on some vacation or, you know, like we're out gallivanting across the desert or, you know, or in the forest. And you do some of that. But the reality is every minute is full for me. And I would imagine for you too. You know, I had to stop the last time I was in North Carolina for work and I had to kind of round up vendors. And so I got an Airbnb for a month and I literally slept for 3 days straight.
Whoa. I think I probably would too. I'd probably sleep and take hot baths every day.
Yes. You know, I'd say I miss baths. Yeah. That would be a con.
Yeah.
I can't really think of a lot of cons though right now.
Yeah. Well, that's good. That's why you're doing it.
I mean, I don't know, like, I think something that is disheartening to me is I feel like more and more I don't relate to a lot of people in my life.
That can definitely be a thing. I've noticed that as well.
But that's also the result of mindset changes of mine that I also appreciate. So it's like this.
It's a weird thing.
It is a weird thing. Because you really, I mean, when you take away all the fluff, you really start looking at how you used to live and how society at large lives and realize like how detached from reality that can be.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you translate that into a phone conversation or, you know, going to visit someone and you're kind of like, whoa, like, oh, okay. I don't know. I think that's but I don't know that it's a con, but it is in the sense that maybe your relationships are going to change quite a bit.
Yeah. I was having this conversation recently with a friend about how relationships grow and evolve over time anyway. They flow. Sometimes you're closer together, sometimes you're farther apart, and it's not necessarily like good or bad. It just is what it is. Sometimes you outgrow each other completely. And I think that
and it's okay. People have a hard time with that.
Yeah. I don't think it matters like what kind of lifestyle change you're making. Right? Like if you are making a lifestyle change that is significantly different from the one you previously lived and the one that like your friends that you made during that period of your life are currently living, then it can be a challenge. Like, you know, the people who get married at a really young age when their friends are still out partying, doing whatever they want. then their friendships change because they're in a different phase of life. Or if you have kids really young, or if you have kids later in life when your friends' kids are, you know, teenagers already, like your lives are just different. And van life is another one of those things. Like we just have completely different priorities, and the things we wait on are different.
And, you know, I think just as much with all of those lifestyle changes, you know, something in you does fundamentally change.
Like your dogs are going to be better for the rest of their lives for having done this, and so are you. Like your life is forever going to be changed. You know, if you do get stationary again and you have your land or you have property that's near public land, it doesn't really matter. If you go back to living in a house in any way, you're still going to be a version of the you are now, not the you were then.
But then, like, part of me says, like, will I be able to do that? Because, I mean, like I said, I spent a month in an Airbnb, and it's like, by the end, I'm like, okay, gotta go.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like you start to feel a little stale or something, or at least I do.
I get really trapped feeling, and I get really lazy.
Yeah, because it's a lot easier.
Yeah.
And I think that's what a lot of, you know, I have a lot of people reach out. Oh, I wanna, you know, buy a van and da da da. And I'm like, you'll last 2 months. I know you.
Mm-hmm.
It's not easy, you know, and it takes a lot of grit, for sure.
Yeah.
So, and I know it's very romanticized online at the moment.
Yeah. Oh, it definitely is. I feel like the pandemic was a big pro and a big con in and of itself, right? Because it brought a lot of attention to this lifestyle, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but at the same time, you know, that whole like hashtag van life, hashtag blessed, like always waking up in a new area, always like having new adventures and gallivanting off and taking these beautiful photos. Like that's not reality.
No. And in fact, like my business is so social media based that a lot of times when it comes to, you know, my personal account, I'm like, I'm so not in the mood. You know, like I did a couple of photo projects when I was in North Carolina that I think like zapped my camera motivation still. And then like also just enjoying it and not being focused on presenting it.
Yes. I think there's a really big distinction there, and I appreciate that you said it that way, like showing it, sharing it, not like presenting it. Like it's not like a reality show where people see like every minute of your life and it's always so glamorous.
Right. It's not. I mean, I don't think I would call van life glamorous. I think it's a little deeper than that, if that's the right word.
I think it depends on how you go about it and why you got into it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's a funny thing to me. It's always funny to like watch social media antics on the road, whether they're, you know, people that are traveling or people who are tourists. Like it's really funny to me. I get quite a lot of entertainment out of it. In many ways, like it's one of those things that I feel like everyone should do at some point in their life. But then again, no, not everyone should do it because again, a lot of people wouldn't enjoy it.
Yeah, I think that I fully agree. I think a lot of people wouldn't enjoy it. Not to say that you shouldn't ever try it, but like maybe just try it for like a weekend or a week and not.
It's funny too when my friends are like, well, let's meet up. And I'm like, okay, rent a van. Like there's not enough room in mine. And you know, this is me. This is what I'm doing right now. Like, no, I don't want to go get a hotel room and do blank, 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 blank. I want you to come experience this. Like,
yeah,
that's where I am right now with that. Because at the end of the day, we're all going to end up sitting at home watching television.
Yeah.
Screaming about politics, you know, like think about it. Like that's what people do eventually. Yeah. It's, or they, you know, they get on, some of them are on the road. But That's like my new, retirement image, I guess, is like, but when you're tired of the bumpy roads and all of that, then you succumb to the big A class, right? And you're like the little old lady with her dog. My whole image has changed now. Because that's fun too.
Yeah. So do you think your future looks like, I mean, you said earlier that you don't see yourself getting off the road for a long time. Do you think that you'll do this forever? And you'll always have that national forest backyard because you'll always be on the road and in it.
So it's kind of funny because I have packed up all my things and put them in storage and traveled before, but it was by plane. And I have that same kind of feeling of contentment doing this that I had then. And I always think back to a friend of mine took a gap year professionally. She had someone move into her house and watch her dogs, and she traveled the world. But it was really important for her to maintain that sense of home and keep her house functioning and do, and I just I always go back to that because I'm like, I completely don't need that. Like, I almost prefer that feeling of being untethered. And so maybe I am always on the road. I mean, I don't know. I have no desire to not be right now. Other than I do think for like just rest and restoral, I want to take those breaks, those month-long breaks, maybe twice a year, just to kind of regroup, and they would probably be in North Carolina twice a year because I need to go there and round up business and then head out again. So
I think that makes sense. I got a question on my first listener Q&A episode about avoiding burnout on the road, and that was kind of my suggestion, like, A, know yourself, know what you need, and B, like, give yourself a break when you need it. Get yourself a hotel or an Airbnb for a night or a week or a month, or, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. When I first moved into the van 2 years ago, I was very concerned with like it counting, so like if I moved into the van in the winter and I came down south, and I was down south for a few weeks, but then when I got back to Colorado, when I got back to Denver, it was too cold to be in the van. I couldn't drive it because there was snow, and the van doesn't drive in the snow, and it was just too cold to be in the van because it was like 7 degrees. So I like house sat for a friend of mine who had a house in Denver and wasn't in it, and but I didn't want to like tell anybody because I didn't want to be like, oh, you're not a real van lifer if you're like not in the van full time. And that's ridiculous.
That was on my mind too, because you do see that online, is this van life, the real van life, or van life done right. It's like, to me, that's counterintuitive to why you do this in the first place. You do it to get out of norms, to get away from norms. So this rhetoric around real van life.
Yeah. You don't get to gatekeep other people's experience. If you get into van life because you need a life change, like, people can't tell you that you're doing it wrong. Like, oh no, you're doing your own life incorrectly. Like, no, this is my life. I'm going to do it how I want to do it.
Well, it's like that. I fortunately, I don't really hear people say it when people are like, oh, out here living the life. Well, whose life? My life? Like, I just used to laugh whenever I'd hear that. But I think too, also to like staying on the road long term, I will always have a van now, which is something I never thought I'd say, or something I never thought I'd own, because it's just with the dogs, you know what I mean? It's like, or going anywhere, you just hop in. I can thank, I really did discover truck stops during the pandemic, because in the beginning, that's really all that was open.
Yeah.
And I did get stuck in North Carolina in the spring when the first lockdown. And once they started talking about opening things up, I felt comfortable to get back on the road. I literally could not sit and watch the news any longer. And I was very, if you listen to all the rhetoric that was out there at that time, you would have thought that every state border had armed guards at it, right?
Yeah. Because there were some states that, there was rumor that they were going to lock down their borders, but I was like, how are they going to enforce that? We don't have the resources to enforce things.
There's no gates. I mean, that's just like,
yeah, that's ridiculous.
That was just silly. Silly. There's a lot of silliness.
A lot of silliness. One of the things that I experienced because I didn't get off the road, like people getting mad that I wasn't getting off the road, right? Like, you're transporting the virus across state lines. Do you know how like irresponsible and reckless you're being? And I'm like, I'm not around anybody. I don't hang out in groups. I'm an introvert.
I feel like I'm being much more responsible when I am on the road.
Yes, I agree. That's how I feel about it. It's easier for me to like go 2 weeks without seeing anybody now.
Yeah. I mean, every market out there, it seems like everyone forgot how to use the internet too in this, and that like I've been doing curbside pickup groceries almost since I started this to buy back time. And you don't even have to buy it. It's a free service, but I love Walmart grocery pickup. I mean,
I've never tried.
Oh, it's amazing. I have a little bit of planning, but because you have sometimes you have to give 24 hours notice or book your thing. Sometimes not, but you go online, you order, you go pick it up, and if you're depending on what you're doing, maybe you spent the night there the night before and you just wake up in your little time slots at 9 a.m. you go get your groceries and you take off. The greatest thing about it is if they're out of something, they like upsize you at the same cost. So like,
that's kind of really cool. Like anything you do in life, you're going to get some kind of pushback for. Someone's not going to understand what you're doing, and that's fine. And if you take everybody's opinion to heart, you'll never do anything at all, and then you're going to be miserable anyway. So just do what you want to do.
It's very true. Like I have been saying for several years that my I don't give a fuck has crossed the finish line, and getting on the road. I mean, like I'm like on Mars with that by now. Like really, I don't care.
What advice would you give to somebody else who's considering getting on the road? They know the pros and cons. They know that it's not glamorous. They know it's going to be a lot of work, but there's still something that they're insecure about.
I think that I have a friend getting on the road right now that I'm super excited to watch. But I think most of the time when someone expresses their concern as they're going through that process, my immediate answer is, are you going to let that stop you from the adventure of a lifetime? Because it really is. I mean, the reality is you get on the road, you hate it, you get off the road.
Yeah. That's exactly how I've always felt about it. People ask me like, what if you do this and you hate it? And I'm like, well, then I'll stop doing it.
Right. I mean, it's, I just think, like, especially, I don't know if you agree with this, but those first few months I think are so exhilarating. There's,
they're very hard.
They're hard.
They are also really exhilarating.
Maybe that's what makes them so exhilarating. Because you're burning through the fears that have been implanted for years, if not your entire lifetime, especially if you are a woman doing it on your own. And a lot of that, it gets a little, when you think through all of that and then think about the reality of it, it's almost overwhelming to be like, how much of my life has been lived on myth? Yeah,
I don't really want to think about that. It would be sad.
I mean, no, because I find it. I actually find it fascinating. But where I think it's sad is people who can't push through that.
Yeah. I think you find out how capable you are when you finally, like those first few months on the road are so exhilarating because you're realizing like how actually capable you are on your own and how much power you have and that you get to make these decisions for yourself. And that's why, like, even though it sucks and it's really hard and you're probably going to deal with things you never thought you were going to deal with, you deal with them and then you're like, oh, well, would you look at that? It wasn't so bad.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I mean, like, I just always laugh when people are like, I have to shower every day.
You don't have to shower every day.
What? I mean, I maybe I'm not a sweater. I don't know, but I'm just fine.
I shower once a week, maybe.
I do understand. The toilet situation could be dangerous for some people. I do get that. Luckily, I'm easy maintenance. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. One thing I tell people, people always ask me about my toilet situation in the van and the shower. And, you know, like, oh, I could never not have a toilet. I could never not have a shower. Like, okay, when you build out your van, you put those things in it if you want to. I don't need them, so I don't have them. Where could people find you online if they wanted to follow more of your adventures with your dog, if they wanted to see more about your dog bed company, etc.?
So the dog bed company is at Fee and Mimi on Instagram.
I'll link to all of these as well.
What's that?
I'm going to link to all of these as well, but
it's feemimigoods.com.
Okay.
And then my personal is Gravel in My Travel. I don't have a website or anything on that. And then Facebook, I think it's Shop Fee and Mimi.
Okay.
We're trying to get the TikTok going, but man, that is a lot of work. Yeah, I guess that's it.
Sweet. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Anytime. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Deliberate Living podcast. If you got value out of this episode, as with any of my others, please do give us a thumbs up or a 5-star, whatever the rating system is on the platform that you are consuming this content on. Also, please feel free to share it with anyone you think it might also resonate with, anyone who can learn from the lessons that we share. If you want to help offset some of the costs that go into making the podcast, I have a Venmo and a PayPal set up. The links for those are in the description. And like I said last week, in the past few weeks, my 1-year anniversary of running the podcast is coming up here soon. So if you have any ideas or requests of something fun that we can do on that episode, go ahead and let me know. And tune in next week for another awesome episode. Have a great day. We've reached the end of this episode of Deliberate Living. You can find the show notes and everything we referenced over on my website, and be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts on YouTube or sign up for email updates every time something new is published. I'll see you next time on Deliberate Living, and until then, keep your life on the DL too.